Across from me stood Julia, my wife, her posture rigid, arms crossed, her eyes blazing with frustration that seemed ready to boil over. Her voice shattered the silence, sharp and commanding. "Mark, I'm not going to repeat myself. David needs help, and you're being absolutely selfish." I took a long breath, placing my coffee cup down carefully. "Julia, we've been over this. It's not about being selfish. It's about priorities. David has leaned on us too much, and it's time he starts taking responsibility for his own actions." Julia's jaw tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line. "He's my brother," she snapped, her tone rising. "Family supports family. That's what we vowed when we got married. Family also learns to stand on their own 2 feet," I countered, my voice calm but firm. I wasn't trying to escalate things, but I couldn't back down either. We've bailed David out of more situations than I can count. He has to learn to handle his problems without dragging us down with him. Julia stepped closer, the chair across from me squealing as she pulled it out and sat down abruptly. Her face was set like stone, her piercing gaze locking onto mine. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice low but trembling with barely restrained anger. "You've never had siblings, so you can't understand. You don't know what it means to be there for someone, no matter what." Her words stung, but I forced myself to remain composed. "You're right, Julia. I don't have siblings," I said evenly. "But that doesn't mean I don't understand responsibility. And right now, my responsibility is to us, to our finances, to our future. I can't keep giving when it's clear David has no intention of changing." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see the fury building behind her eyes, her hands gripping the edge of the table as though holding herself back. Then, without warning, she grabbed her coffee cup and hurled its contents at me. Time seemed to slow. The dark liquid arched through the air, and before I could react, it hit me full in the face. The scalding heat seared my skin, and I gasped, the shock hitting me harder than the pain. The mug clattered onto the table, its sharp sound echoing in the otherwise silent kitchen. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, stunned. My face burned, my shirt was soaked, and my hands trembled slightly as I reached for a napkin to dab at the stinging liquid. Julia stood frozen, her own expression a mix of anger and something that looked almost like regret, but it was fleeting. Her lips parted as though she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Finally, I broke the silence. "What the hell, Julia?" My voice was low, quiet even, but the weight of my disbelief carried more force than if I'd shouted. "You pushed me, Mark," she said, her tone defensive, though there was a hint of unease in her voice. "I didn't mean." "No," I cut her off, standing slowly. "You meant it. You were angry, and you meant every bit of this." I gestured to my soaked shirt and reddened skin. "This isn't just about David. This is about control. About you thinking you can manipulate me into doing what you want, no matter how it affects me, or us." Julia's expression hardened again, the moment of hesitation gone. "You're being dramatic," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just coffee. You're acting like I threw something at me?" I interrupted. "Because that's exactly what you did, Julia, and don't you dare minimize it." For the first time, I saw something shift in her expression. Not guilt, not apology, something closer to defiance. "If you just agreed to help David, none of this would have happened," she said, her voice rising again. "This is on you, Mark." I stared at her, my mind racing. Was this who she had always been? Had I ignored the signs, written off the red flags as stress or passion or love? Or had things changed so gradually that I didn't notice until now? "I think we're done here," I said finally, my voice flat. "I need some air." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the kitchen. The morning sunlight, once so inviting, now felt like a cruel mockery of what should have been. As I headed for the bathroom to wash the coffee from my face, one thought echoed in my mind. This isn't just about breakfast. This is about everything. I stood in the bathroom, staring into the mirror as cold water ran over my face. My skin still tingled where the coffee had burned, the redness a stark reminder of what had just happened. It wasn't just the physical sting that lingered. It was the deeper realization that something fundamental in my marriage had cracked, maybe beyond repair. I shut off the tap and leaned heavily on the sink, letting the water drip from my chin. My reflection stared back at me, tired and worn, with dark circles under my eyes that hadn't been there a few years ago. How had I gotten here? When had Julia become someone who could throw coffee in my face during an argument? Or maybe the real question was, when did I stop recognizing the woman I married? As the cool air from the vent hit my damp skin, memories began to swirl in my mind. I remembered our early days, Julia and I laughing over burnt dinners in our first tiny apartment, staying up late talking about our dreams, her teasing me about my obsession with organizing the spice rack. Those moments seemed so far away now, like they belonged to a different lifetime. Back then, we were a team. We had each other's backs, no matter what. But somewhere along the line, things had changed. Julia had changed. Or maybe I had changed, and I just hadn't realized it until now. I thought about David, her brother. He had always been a source of tension between us. From the beginning, Julia had insisted that helping him was part of being a family. I'd agreed at first, loaning him money here and there, covering his rent once or twice. But the requests never stopped, and they were never small. A new car because his old one didn't fit his image. A trip to Vegas to de-stress. A loan for a business idea that never materialized. And every time, Julia defended him, made excuses for him. He's just going through a rough patch, she'd say. He'll pay us back once he gets on his feet. But he never did. I tried to set boundaries, but Julia always found a way to push back. It's my brother, Mark, she'd say, her tone dripping with exasperation. How can you be so heartless? Heartless. That word always stung. I'd spent so much time questioning myself, wondering if maybe I was being too rigid, too unyielding. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about being heartless. It was about being drained, emotionally, financially, and now, physically. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the tension in my shoulders. Today wasn't the first time Julia had crossed a line. It was just the most blatant. The raised voices, the guilt trips, the subtle digs at my character. They'd been happening for years, but I'd convinced myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. It's just a rough patch, I'd tell myself. All couples argue. She's under stress. Things will get better. But would they? Or had I been lying to myself all along? The sound of the faucet dripping pulled me back to the present. I straightened, looking at my reflection again. My shirt was ruined, the coffee stain spreading like a bruise across the fabric. I peeled it off and tossed it into the laundry basket, then reached for a fresh one from the cabinet. The act of changing felt almost symbolic, like shedding a layer of myself that I didn't need anymore. As I buttoned up the clean shirt, a new thought began to take shape. What if this wasn't just about David or the coffee or even the argument itself? What if this was about a pattern? A pattern of me bending, compromising, and giving, while Julia took and demanded more. And what if I didn't want to keep living like this? The idea was unsettling, but it also carried a strange kind of clarity. For years, I'd convinced myself that holding on was the only option. That walking away would mean failure, betrayal, weakness. But now, standing in that bathroom, I started to wonder if holding on was the real betrayal, the betrayal of myself. I turned away from the mirror and walked back into the bedroom. Julia was nowhere to be seen, and the silence in the house was heavy, almost oppressive. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I picked it up instinctively. It was a text from my best friend, Ryan. We hadn't talked much in the past year. Julia never liked him, said he was a bad influence. But now, seeing his name on the screen, I felt an overwhelming urge to respond. I typed out a quick message. Hey, you busy? The reply came almost instantly. For you? Never. What's up? I stared at the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. How do you explain in a few words that your marriage is falling apart? That the person you thought you'd spend your life with just threw coffee in your face? That you're starting to wonder if staying is the worst decision you've ever made? Finally, I settled on a simple response. Can we talk? Ryan's reply was immediate. Of course. Come over whenever you're ready. As I set the phone down, I felt a strange mix of emotions. relief, fear, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, I was starting to think about what I needed, what I wanted. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step towards something better. I sat in the car parked outside Ryan's apartment, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me anchored. The drive over had been a blur, my mind swirling with everything that had happened at breakfast. My cheek still tingled faintly where the coffee had burned, but the real sting was somewhere deeper, lodged in my chest. The thought of going back to that house, to Julia, felt suffocating. But sitting here, trying to make sense of it all, wasn't much better. Ryan lived in one of those modern complexes with clean lines and bright paint, the kind of place Julia would have called soulless. Ironic, considering how hollow I felt walking through the front door of our own home every day. I grabbed my phone and texted him, "I'm here." A moment later, the door to the building opened, and there he was, standing in jeans and a faded hoodie, his hair still messy from sleep. Ryan and I had been friends since college, through bad breakups, late-night study sessions, and too many beers at the local dive bar. He grinned when he saw me, but his smile faltered as he got closer. "Mark," he said, his voice careful, like he was talking to someone on the edge of a cliff. "What's going on? You look like you've been hit by a truck." "Not a truck," I said, managing a weak laugh. "Coffee." His brow furrowed, but he didn't push. "Come on up." Ryan's apartment was exactly as I remembered, cluttered but cozy, with mismatched furniture and a faint smell of coffee and cinnamon. He waved me toward the couch and disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later, he returned with 2 mugs and handed one to me. "I figured coffee might not be your thing right now," he said, nodding at the tea he'd brewed instead. I gave him a small, grateful smile and took a sip. The warmth was soothing, but it didn't stop the knot in my stomach from tightening. Ryan sat down across from me, waiting. He always knew when to stay quiet, which was probably why we'd stayed friends for so long. "It's Julia," I said finally, my voice sounding foreign in the quiet room. "This morning, she threw coffee in my face." Ryan's eyes widened, but he didn't interrupt. I took another sip of tea, the words tumbling out in a rush. I told him about the argument, about David's constant demands, about Julia's refusal to set boundaries. And then, finally, about the moment she snapped and threw her coffee at me. "She said it was my fault," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "that if I'd just done what she wanted, it wouldn't have happened." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his expression dark. "That's not okay, Mark. I don't care what the argument was about. That's not okay." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, but I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. "I don't know what to do, Ryan. This isn't the first time we fought like this. It's not even the worst fight we've had. But it feels different now, like something broke, and I can't put it back together." Ryan watched me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you've been unhappy for a long time, Mark. Every time we talk, you tell me about another fight, another argument, another way Julia's made you feel like crap. And every time, you say the same thing, it'll get better. But it hasn't, has it?" I shook my head, staring down at the tea in my hands. "No, it hasn't." "So maybe," he said carefully, "it's time to stop waiting for it to get better. Maybe it's time to start thinking about what's best for you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd spent so much time trying to fix things, trying to make Julia happy, trying to hold everything together. I hadn't stopped to think about what I wanted, or needed, in years. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded, his expression softening. "That's okay. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just take it one step at a time." "First step? Don't go back to that house tonight." I looked up at him, startled. "What?" "Stay here," he said simply. "At least for tonight. Give yourself some space to think without her breathing down your neck." The thought of staying away from the house, even for one night, felt both terrifying and like a relief I didn't know I needed. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." Ryan rolled his eyes. "You're not imposing. Besides, I've got beer in the fridge and a couch that's way comfier than it looks. What more do you need? For the first time all day, I felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe the first step was just stepping away. Okay, I said finally, setting the tea down on the coffee table. Okay, I'll stay. Ryan grinned, clapping me on the shoulder. Good. Now let's order some pizza, watch something stupid on TV, and not think about your crazy wife for a few hours. I laughed, the sound shaky but real. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel so alone. The road ahead was still unclear, but at least I wasn't walking it by myself. And for now, that was enough. The morning light filtered through the blinds in Ryan's living room, casting long shadows across the mismatched furniture. I had barely slept, the couch proving far less comfortable than Ryan had promised. But it wasn't the lumpy cushions or the unfamiliar surroundings that kept me awake. It was the realization that my life, as I knew it, was unraveling. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of traffic outside. Ryan's snores echoed from his bedroom, a strangely comforting reminder that someone was close by. I hadn't told him everything yet. I'd skirted around the bigger issues, kept the ugliest parts of my marriage hidden even from myself. But after last night's conversation, I knew I couldn't avoid the truth much longer. By the time Ryan shuffled into the living room, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, I was already nursing a second cup of coffee. He raised an eyebrow at me, his messy hair and faded t-shirt a stark contrast to my tense, polished appearance. "You're up early," he said, heading to the kitchen. "Or did you even sleep?" "Not much," I admitted, staring into my mug. "Too much on my mind." Ryan returned with his own coffee, sinking into the armchair across from me. He didn't say anything, just watched me with that patient, knowing expression he always had when he knew I was about to crack. And crack I did. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I don't even know where to start." Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Start by telling me everything," he said simply. "No holding back." I hesitated, the words caught in my throat, but then they started spilling out, faster than I could control. I told him about the years of arguments, the constant guilt trips, the way Julia always seemed to twist every situation to make me feel like the bad guy. I told him about David and his endless demands, about how I tried to set boundaries only to have them ignored. And finally, I told him about yesterday morning, the coffee, the accusations, the look in Julia's eyes when she realized what she'd done. Ryan didn't interrupt, didn't try to offer solutions or platitudes. He just listened, his expression growing darker with every word. By the time I finished, I felt like I'd been wrung out. Every ounce of anger and frustration poured into the space between us. "Mark," he said finally, his voice low and steady, "this isn't just a rough patch. This is abuse." The word hit me like a slap. Abuse. I'd avoided calling it that, convinced that what I was going through wasn't bad enough to warrant the label. But hearing Ryan say it out loud, with such certainty, made me realize that I'd been lying to myself for years. "I don't know what to do," I said again, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan sat back, crossing his arms over his chest. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. But the first step? You need help, real help. A lawyer, maybe even a therapist. Someone who can help you figure out how to get out of this." I nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. "A lawyer sounds expensive." Ryan smirked. "Lucky for you, I know a guy. Well, more like a friend of a guy, but he's good. Handles stuff like this all the time. I'll give him a call." "Are you sure? I don't want to waste his time." "Mark, this isn't wasting anyone's time. You've been dealing with this crap for years. It's time to start putting yourself first." The thought was both terrifying and liberating. I'd spent so long bending over backward to make Julia happy, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. The idea of putting myself first felt almost selfish. But maybe Ryan was right. Maybe it wasn't selfish, it was necessary. "Okay," I said finally. "Call him." Ryan grinned, pulling out his phone. "You won't regret this." As he stepped out onto the balcony to make the call, I leaned back on the couch, letting out a shaky breath. For the first time in years, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. When Ryan returned, he was grinning. Good news. He can see you tomorrow morning. I'll go with you if you want. I nodded, grateful for the offer. Thanks, Ryan. I don't think I can do this alone. You're not alone, he said firmly. Not anymore. For the rest of the day, Ryan and I worked on a plan. We listed out everything I needed to do. Gather important documents, secure my finances, start looking for a place to stay. The list felt overwhelming, but having it written down made it feel more manageable, like I finally had a roadmap out of the mess I'd been living in. As the day turned into evening, I found myself feeling lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time, I could see a way forward. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, the sunlight pouring through Ryan's apartment felt unusually bright, almost intrusive. I hadn't slept much again, but this time, it wasn't restlessness. It was anticipation, anxiety, dread. Today was the day I would finally confront Julia. After everything, it was time to make it clear that I couldn't do this anymore. Ryan was already up, pacing the small kitchen with his phone in hand. All right, the lawyer is expecting you this afternoon, he said, glancing at me. But first, you need to have that talk with Julia. I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. I'd spent all night rehearsing what I wanted to say, but now that the moment was here, my mind felt blank. How do you tell your wife that the life you built together is over? How do you end something that, for better or worse, has been your entire world for years? You sure you don't want me to come with you? Ryan asked, leaning against the counter. I shook my head. No, I need to do this alone. If she sees you, it'll just give her something else to focus on. This needs to be between me and her. Ryan didn't look convinced, but he nodded. All right, just call me if things get out of hand. I promised I would, but deep down, I wasn't sure what out of hand even meant anymore. Wasn't the coffee incident enough? The drive back to the house was eerily familiar. Every turn and landmark etched into my memory like a map I couldn't escape. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were trembling. I sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. It looked so ordinary, so deceptively normal, but I knew better. Behind that door was the life I was about to leave behind. I stepped out of the car, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, and walked up to the door. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. The only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Julia was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone, a mug of coffee in front of her. For a moment, the scene was almost peaceful, but the tension in the air was undeniable. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. You're back, she said simply, her tone devoid of warmth. I nodded, setting my keys on the counter. We need to talk. Julia's brow furrowed. About what? If it's about David, I'm not doing this again. It's not just about David, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. It's about us. About everything. She rolled her eyes, leaning back in her chair. Oh, here we go. Another lecture about how I'm the problem. Go ahead, Mark. Get it out of your system. I took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the counter for support. Julia, this isn't working. I've tried to make it work, but it's not. The arguments, the demands, the way you treat me. It's not what a marriage is supposed to be. Her eyes narrowed, the corners of her mouth tightening. Oh, so now I'm the villain? Is that it? You're the perfect husband, and I'm the evil wife who doesn't appreciate you. This isn't about assigning blame, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. It's about recognizing that this relationship has become toxic for both of us, and I can't do it anymore. Her expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing her face before it hardened again. You're being ridiculous, she said, her voice rising. Every couple fights, Mark. That doesn't mean you just give up. This isn't just fighting, Julia, I said, my voice firm. This is years of me bending over backward to make you happy, sacrificing my own needs, my own boundaries, while you take and take without ever giving back. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Sacrificing, she snapped. What exactly have you sacrificed, Mark? Because from where I'm standing, you've done nothing but complain every time I've asked for help. Help? I repeated, incredulous. You call throwing coffee in my face asking for help? Julia flinched at that, her cheeks flushing. That was a mistake, she said, her voice quieter now. I was angry. I wasn't thinking. That's the problem, Julia. You never think. You just react, and I'm always the one who has to deal with the fallout. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Then Julia stepped closer, her voice trembling with anger. So what are you saying, Mark? That you're done? That you're just walking away? I met her gaze, my heart pounding in my chest. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what I'm saying. Her expression crumpled, a mixture of shock and disbelief. You're serious? I am, I said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I can't keep doing this, Julia. I need to start putting myself first, for once. She stared at me, her lips trembling as though she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Finally, she turned away, her shoulders slumping. Fine, she said quietly. Do whatever you want. The finality of her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I turned and walked toward the door, grabbing my keys off the counter. I'll be in touch about the details, I said over my shoulder. Through my lawyer. And with that, I stepped out into the sunlight, the door closing softly behind me. My chest felt tight, my legs shaky, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going back. Driving away from the house was surreal. The weight of the confrontation with Julia lingered, leaving me both drained and strangely lighter. The road ahead felt uncertain, but at least it was mine to navigate now. For years, I had been living on autopilot, putting out fires in a marriage that had long since lost its warmth. Today marked the first step toward reclaiming my life. I pulled into Ryan's driveway, my mind already racing with what needed to be done. The house might still hold my name, but it no longer felt like home. That realization hit me hard, but it also fueled a sense of urgency. If I was going to rebuild, I needed to act fast and think strategically. Ryan opened the door before I could even knock. Well, he asked, his tone cautious. It's done, I said, stepping inside. She knows it's over. Ryan let out a low whistle, closing the door behind me. How'd she take it? I shrugged, sinking onto the couch. About as well as you'd expect. There was some yelling, some guilt-tripping, but she didn't fight me as hard as I thought she would. I think she knew this was coming. He nodded, handing me a cold bottle of water. That's a start. Now comes the hard part. I raised an eyebrow. Harder than this morning? Ryan smirked. Way harder. You've got to plan your next moves. Money, housing, legal stuff. You've got to make sure she doesn't blindside you later. He wasn't wrong. I took a deep sip of water and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Where do I even begin? Ryan grabbed a notebook and pen from the kitchen counter, flipping to a fresh page. First things first, finances. You've got joint accounts, right? I nodded. Yeah, but most of our money is in my paycheck. She doesn't work, so? So you need to protect yourself, Ryan cut in. Transfer your direct deposit into a new account. Cancel the credit card she has access to. Make sure she can't run up debt in your name while you're sorting things out. I frowned. That feels harsh. It's not harsh, Ryan said firmly. It's smart. Trust me, you don't want to deal with a financial mess on top of everything else. This isn't about being petty. It's about being prepared. He was right. Julia had never been shy about spending, and if she felt vindictive, there was nothing stopping her from draining our accounts or maxing out the cards. I pulled out my phone and started jotting down notes. New bank account. Cancel joint credit cards. Update passwords. What's next? I asked. Housing, Ryan said, tapping his pen against the notebook. You staying here for now, or are you thinking of finding your own place? I hesitated. The thought of staying with Ryan indefinitely didn't sit right with me. I didn't want to overstay my welcome. But finding a new place felt overwhelming, especially when I wasn't sure what my financial situation would look like after the divorce. Here for now, I said finally, but I'll start looking for something small. An apartment, maybe? Ryan nodded. Good call. In the meantime, make a list of things you'll need from the house. Clothes, important documents, anything you don't want to lose. I winced at the thought of going back there, but he was right again. There were things I couldn't leave behind. My passport, birth certificate, insurance documents, and a few personal items, like the watch my dad gave me before he passed. I'll figure that out, I said, scribbling another note. Legal stuff, Ryan continued. You've got the meeting with the lawyer this afternoon, right? Yeah, I said, but I don't even know what to ask. Ryan leaned forward, his expression serious. Ask about everything. Divorce proceedings, restraining orders if you need them, how to protect your assets. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be. I nodded, my stomach churning at the thought of sitting across from a lawyer and laying out the mess my life had become. But Ryan was right. This was about taking control, even if it meant facing some uncomfortable truths. What about work? He asked, glancing at me. You taking time off, or are you going back? I hesitated. My job was a lifeline, both financially and emotionally, but I couldn't imagine walking into the office and pretending everything was fine. I'll go back, I said finally, but maybe not this week. I need a few days to figure things out. Ryan grinned. You're doing good, man. This is the hardest part, but you're handling it. I let out a short laugh. Doesn't feel like it. Trust me, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. You've got this. The rest of the morning was a blur of phone calls and emails. I opened a new bank account, canceled the joint credit cards, and updated the passwords on everything from my email to my online banking. Each task felt like a small victory, a step closer to independence. When it was time to leave for the lawyer's office, Ryan insisted on coming with me. You'll need someone to take notes, he said with a grin. Plus, I want to see this lawyer of yours in action. I didn't argue. Having him there made the whole thing feel less daunting. The lawyer's office was smaller than I expected, tucked into a modest building on the edge of downtown. The receptionist greeted us warmly, and within minutes, we were sitting across from a man who looked every bit the part of a no-nonsense attorney. Mr. Peters, he said, extending a hand, I've been briefed on your situation. Let's talk about how we're going to protect you. For the next hour, we went over everything, finances, assets, what to expect in the divorce process. He was thorough and direct, laying out a clear plan for the months ahead. By the time we left, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time, I felt like I had a fighting chance. As Ryan and I walked back to the car, he clapped me on the back. See? You're handling this like a pro. I managed a small smile. One step at a time. One step at a time, he agreed. And you're not alone. I nodded, gripping the keys in my hand. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally moving in the right direction. The drive back to Ryan's place after meeting with the lawyer felt like a strange mix of accomplishment and dread. I had taken tangible steps forward, canceling joint accounts, securing legal representation. But the confrontation with Julia loomed heavy in my mind. I knew she wouldn't take my departure lying down, and I had no illusions that things would somehow remain civil. Julia didn't lose gracefully. As I pulled into Ryan's driveway, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced down to see Julia's name flashing on the screen. My chest tightened as I debated whether to answer. Ignoring her would only make things worse, but I wasn't ready for another shouting match. With a sigh, I picked up and put the phone to my ear. What is it, Julia? I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. Her voice came through sharp and accusatory. Where the hell are you, Mark? I came home, and you're just gone? What's this about lawyers and canceled cards? Are you really doing this? Yes, Julia, I said firmly. I'm doing this. I told you this morning. I'm done. Done? She spat, her tone incredulous. You don't just get to decide you're done. We're married, Mark. You don't get to walk away like this. I do, Julia, I said, my voice steady but exhausted. I do get to walk away. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. There was a beat of silence, then her tone shifted, laced with icy resolve. You're making a huge mistake. And if you think you can just leave me high and dry, you've got another thing coming. My brother is coming over later, and I expect you to be here. I nearly laughed at the audacity. David is not my responsibility, I said. And neither is this mess. I've spent years cleaning up after him, after you, and I'm done. Don't expect me to be there when he shows up. You're such a coward, she hissed. You're abandoning your family because you can't handle a little conflict. Is that the kind of man you are? I closed my eyes, gripping the steering wheel as I tried to keep my temper in check. You can call me whatever you want, Julia, but I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. Before she could respond, I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the seat. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't fear. It was anger. I sat there for a moment, letting the silence of the car wash over me, then finally stepped out and headed inside. Ryan was in the kitchen when I walked in, a beer in one hand and a sandwich in the other. He looked up as I entered, his face immediately concerned. What happened? Julia, I said simply, dropping my keys onto the counter. She's furious. She's accusing me of abandoning her and David. Ryan shook his head, setting the beer down. Of course she is. She's losing control, and she doesn't know how to handle it. I leaned against the counter, running a hand through my hair. She said David's coming over later, like that's supposed to scare me back into the house. Ryan raised an eyebrow. And nothing, I said firmly. I'm not going back. She can deal with her brother on her own. He nodded approvingly. Good. Stick to your guns, man. She's trying to manipulate you, and the best thing you can do is not give her the reaction she wants. I let out a long breath, some of the tension in my chest easing. I don't know how this is going to end. She's not the kind of person who lets things go. Ryan smirked. She doesn't have to let it go. You just have to make sure she can't drag you down with her. You've got the lawyer. You've got a plan. Let her stew in her own mess. I nodded, his words settling something inside me. For so long, I'd been caught in the cycle of Julia's anger and manipulation, always trying to smooth things over, always trying to keep the peace. But now, for the first time, I felt like I was breaking free of that cycle. I didn't have to play her game anymore. Later that evening, as Ryan and I sat on the couch watching a mindless action movie, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen and saw a text from Julia. David is here. He's furious. You need to fix this. I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. For years, fixing this had been my role in our relationship. Cleaning up messes, smoothing over arguments, taking the blame when things went wrong. But not anymore. I typed out a simple response. I'm not coming back. This is your mess to deal with. Her reply came almost instantly. You're going to regret this. I turned off the phone and set it face down on the table. Ryan glanced over, raising an eyebrow. Everything okay? I nodded, leaning back against the cushions. Yeah, everything's fine. For the first time in a long time, I believed it. The first night back at Ryan's place after cutting ties with Julia felt like a strange mix of relief and restlessness. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing as I tried to process everything that had happened. The house, the argument, her text. You're going to regret this. It all played on a loop in my mind. But for all the noise in my head, there was a tiny, persistent voice that kept repeating, you're free now. Morning came, and with it, a sense of purpose. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing. I needed to rebuild. My life was a blank slate, and while that was terrifying, it was also exhilarating. For the first time in years, I felt like I had the power to decide what came next. Ryan was already in the kitchen when I got up, pouring cereal into a bowl with the kind of nonchalance that made it clear he hadn't spent the night replaying his life's choices. Morning, he said, glancing up at me. How'd you sleep? Better, I lied. Truthfully, I hadn't slept much at all, but I didn't want to dwell on it. I think I need to start looking for a place today. Ryan set his bowl down and crossed his arms. You don't have to rush. You can stay here as long as you need. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. Ryan had been a rock through all of this, and I wasn't sure where I'd be without him. But I need to start figuring things out. I can't live on your couch forever. He grinned. Fair enough. Let me know if you need help. Moving, furniture shopping, awkward landlord negotiations. I'm your guy. I smiled, grateful for his easygoing support. Thanks, man. After breakfast, I grabbed my laptop and started searching for apartments. It was overwhelming at first. There were so many options, and I had no idea where to start. Did I want to be close to work? Near a park? Somewhere with a view? I realized I hadn't thought about what I wanted in a long time. Most of my decisions over the past few years had revolved around Julia, her preferences, her needs, her demands. The realization was sobering. I decided to narrow it down to the essentials: affordable, safe, and within a reasonable distance from work. The rest could come later. After a couple of hours, I found a promising lead: a small one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it looked clean and well-maintained, and the rent was within my budget. I called the landlord, a pleasant-sounding woman named Mrs. Turner, and arranged to see the place that afternoon. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and excitement. This was happening. I was really doing this. Mrs. Turner met me at the apartment, a cheerful woman in her 60s with silver hair and a warm smile. "You must be Mark," she said, shaking my hand. "Come on in. I'll show you around." The apartment was small but cozy, with hardwood floors and large windows that let in plenty of light. The kitchen was dated but functional, and the living room had just enough space for a couch and a TV. The bedroom was small but had a decent closet, and the bathroom, while basic, was clean. "It's not much," Mrs. Turner said as I looked around, "but it's a good place to start. I had a young couple living here before, but they just bought a house, so it's available immediately." "It's perfect," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. For the first time in years, I felt like I could see myself somewhere. A place that was mine and mine alone. Mrs. Turner smiled. "I like your enthusiasm. If you're interested, we can start the paperwork today." "I'm interested," I said without hesitation. By the time I got back to Ryan's place that evening, I had signed the lease and picked up the keys. It felt surreal, holding that small piece of metal in my hand. It represented so much more than just access to an apartment. It was freedom, independence, a fresh start. Ryan greeted me at the door, grinning when he saw the keys. "Well, look at you, Mr. Independent. How's it feel?" "Terrifying," I admitted, but I couldn't help but smile. "And amazing." He clapped me on the back. "You're doing it, man. One step at a time." The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and planning. I made a list of things I needed to grab from the house: clothes, documents, a few personal items, and scheduled a time to pick them up when Julia wouldn't be there. It was awkward and uncomfortable, but I got through it without incident. Each item I packed into my car felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When moving day arrived, Ryan and a few mutual friends helped me haul boxes and furniture into the new place. It was exhausting, but by the end of the day, I was surrounded by my belongings in a space that felt like the beginning of something new. That night, I sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating pizza and staring at the walls. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells or waiting for the next argument to erupt. The silence wasn't oppressive, it was mine. I leaned back against the wall, taking a deep breath. The road ahead was still uncertain, and there was a lot to figure out. But sitting there, surrounded by the bare bones of my new life, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The days following my move into the apartment felt like stepping into a new world, one where every decision, every corner of the space, and every silence was entirely mine. It wasn't just about unpacking boxes or arranging furniture. It was about rediscovering myself in ways I hadn't anticipated. The first morning in the new place was surreal. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, illuminating the hardwood floor and casting long shadows across the walls. There were no shouts from another room, no passive-aggressive comments lingering in the air, and no tension weighing me down. For the first time in years, I woke up without that familiar sense of dread. I made coffee and sat at the small table I'd found at a thrift store, staring out the window at the quiet street below. The neighborhood was peaceful, birds chirping, a jogger passing by, someone walking their dog. It was a far cry from the chaos I had left behind. As I sipped my coffee, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: contentment. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment and growth. I threw myself into creating a routine, something steady to ground me. Work became my anchor during the day, and in the evenings, I spent time organizing the apartment, making it my own. Each small act, hanging a picture, placing books on a shelf, buying a new rug, felt like a step toward reclaiming my independence. But the nights were the hardest. Without the distractions of work or unpacking, the silence could feel heavy, almost suffocating. Memories of Julia and the life we had built together would creep in, uninvited. I would sit on the couch, staring at old photos I hadn't yet been able to part with, and wonder how things had gone so wrong. There was grief there, mixed with anger and a strange sense of relief. I was mourning the life I thought I'd have, while also celebrating the chance to start over. One day, as I was unpacking a box labeled "Personal," I came across my old journal. I hadn't written in it in years. Julia always dismissed it as a waste of time. But holding it in my hands, flipping through the pages filled with my younger self's dreams and thoughts, something stirred inside me. I grabbed a pen, sat at my small desk, and started writing. At first, the words came haltingly. I wrote about the move, the apartment, the sheer exhaustion of starting over. But as I kept going, the floodgates opened. I wrote about Julia, the good times, the bad, the moments that made me realize I had to leave. I wrote about the years I had spent compromising, losing bits of myself in the process. And as the words spilled onto the page, I felt lighter, as though I was shedding the weight of the past. Reconnecting with old friends became another unexpected source of healing. Ryan had encouraged me to reach out to people I'd lost touch with, people Julia had pushed away or dismissed as bad influences. I started small, a text here, a coffee meetup there. Each conversation reminded me of the person I used to be before my life revolved around Julia and her demands. One particularly poignant meeting was with Sarah, an old colleague who had always been a supportive presence. Over coffee, I shared my story, something I hadn't done with many people yet. Her reaction was one of genuine concern and validation. "Mark," she said, her voice steady, "you're brave for walking away. Not everyone can do that. Give yourself credit for the strength it took." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I had seen leaving as a failure, an admission that I couldn't fix my marriage. But Sarah helped me reframe it. Leaving wasn't failure, it was survival. It was strength. As the weeks turned into months, the apartment began to feel like home. The walls, once bare, were now adorned with photos, artwork, and pieces that reflected who I was, not who Julia expected me to be. I found joy in the small things: cooking meals without criticism, reading late into the night, playing music as loud as I wanted. These weren't grand gestures, but they were mine, and that made them powerful. The most transformative moment came one rainy afternoon at the bookstore. I was browsing the fiction section when I came across a book I'd loved in college, The Awakening by Kate Chopin. I remembered how deeply Edna's story of self-discovery had resonated with me back then. I bought the book and spent the rest of the evening rereading it, tears streaming down my face as I recognized pieces of myself in Edna's struggle to reclaim her identity. That night, inspired by the book, I opened my laptop and started typing. It wasn't just journaling this time. It was a story, one that mirrored my own journey but with fictional characters and a narrative arc. The words flowed easily, fueled by years of bottled-up thoughts and emotions. Writing became my escape, my therapy, my way of making sense of everything. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt like a different person. The legal battles, though draining, had taught me resilience. I had faced Julia's accusations and manipulation head-on, with the support of my lawyer and friends, and I had come out stronger. On the day I received the final paperwork, I sat on the couch in my apartment, staring at the envelope in my hands. It was over. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Julia and her demands was officially closed. I wasn't just free of her. I was free to be myself. That evening, I made myself a simple dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat at my desk to write. The story I was working on had grown into something larger, something that felt meaningful. It wasn't just about my experiences. It was about hope, resilience, and the power of choosing yourself. As I typed the final words of the chapter, I leaned back in my chair and smiled. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what was to come. This wasn't just a new chapter in my life. It was a whole new book, and I was finally holding the pen. I raised my glass in a quiet toast to the future, to the life I was building, and to the person I was becoming. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Sophia stood in the doorway of our small apartment, the one we had made a home together, her hands gripping the handle of the designer suitcase her mother had sent for her. Our newborn twins lay asleep in their crib, their tiny chests rising and falling, blissfully unaware that their mother was about to walk out of their lives. And me? I stood frozen, feeling the air grow heavier with every second that passed. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophia looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the briefest moment, I saw hesitation in her eyes. It was there, the struggle, the part of her that still loved me, that still wanted to stay. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold, calculated mask she had worn ever since her mother had entered the picture. "My mother is right," she finally said, her voice sharp, almost robotic. "This life isn't for me." My stomach twisted. "This life?" I repeated, barely recognizing my own voice. "You mean our life? The one we built together?" She exhaled sharply, avoiding my gaze. "You don't understand, Michael. I never should have been here in the first place. My mother." I took a step forward, desperation clawing at my throat. "Your mother doesn't love you, Sophia. Not like I do. Not like our children do." For a second, just a second, she wavered. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her suitcase. Her lips parted as if she was about to say something. I wanted to believe that meant there was hope, that she would drop her bags and come back to me, to us. Then the sound of a car horn outside shattered whatever illusion I had left. Her mother's driver was waiting. The decision had already been made. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "I need a future, Michael. I need stability. You can't give me that." I felt something inside me snap. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize love, family, and loyalty weren't stable enough for you." She flinched, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned to look at the sleeping babies in their crib. My heart pounded. She wouldn't just leave them. She couldn't. "Sophia," I pleaded, my voice barely steady, "don't do this to them." Her hand hovered over our son's tiny head, but she never touched him. Maybe she knew that if she did, she would break. Maybe she was already broken and just didn't want me to see it. "My mother said." I slammed my fist against the table, startling her. "I don't give a damn what your mother said. What about what you want? What about our children? You're just going to abandon them? Abandon me?" The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had hit the target. Her jaw clenched, her eyes burned with something I couldn't quite name. Shame? Anger? Fear? "You think this is easy for me," she hissed. "You think I want to walk away?" I took another step forward, lowering my voice. "Then don't." Silence. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away like I had burned her. "I have to," she whispered, barely loud enough for me to hear. She turned toward the door, and panic surged through me. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Sophia, if you leave now, there's no coming back from this." Her shoulders tensed. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she would stop. But then she walked out, suitcase rolling behind her, and my entire world collapsed in on itself. I stood there, staring at the open door, waiting for her to come back, to say she made a mistake, that she chose us over her mother's money and power. But she didn't. The car door slammed shut, the engine roared to life, and within seconds, she was gone. The apartment was suffocatingly quiet, too quiet, and then, as if sensing the change, one of our twins stirred, letting out a soft whimper that quickly turned into a cry. I turned toward them, feeling a sharp, unbearable pain in my chest. They had no idea. No idea that the mother who had carried them, who had whispered promises to them before they were even born, had just left them without a second glance. I stumbled toward the crib, my hands shaking as I picked up my daughter, cradling her against my chest. "It's okay, baby girl," I murmured, rocking her gently. "I've got you." I didn't know if I was saying it for her or for myself. I sank into the rocking chair beside the crib, staring blankly at the empty doorway. I had always imagined our future together. Sophia, me, and our twins. Late-night feedings, first steps, bedtime stories, growing old together. But now, that future had been ripped away from me, all because of one woman's influence. Her mother had always hated me. From the moment Sophia and I started dating, she had looked at me like I was dirt beneath her feet. She never missed an opportunity to remind me that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't have the right family background, the right money, the right name. And she had one. I clenched my jaw, gripping my daughter tighter as I swore under my breath. No, she hadn't one, because I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I looked down at my baby girl, then at my son, still sleeping peacefully. They were my family now. And no matter how hard it was, no matter how broken I felt in this moment, I was going to give them the best life possible, with or without Sophia. I pressed a gentle kiss to my daughter's forehead and wiped away a tear that had fallen onto her tiny cheek. "I promise you," I whispered, "I'll never leave you." And as the night stretched on, as exhaustion and grief threatened to pull me under, I held on to that one promise like a lifeline. I had lost my wife, but I wasn't going to lose my children. When you become a father, there's this unspoken promise you make, to always be there, to protect, to provide, to love. I never thought I'd have to keep that promise alone. The first few weeks after Sophia left were brutal. No, brutal doesn't even begin to describe it. It was like being thrown into a storm with no shelter, no warning, no life jacket. Just me, struggling to stay afloat while two tiny lives depended on me for everything. Nights became an endless cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and exhaustion so deep it felt like my bones were made of lead. My twins, barely weeks old, had no idea that their mother had walked out on them. No idea that the man holding them at 3 a.m, whispering lullabies with a voice cracked from exhaustion, was barely holding it together. And that's the thing. I had to hold it together. There was no other option. I was their father, the only parent they had left. I couldn't afford to break. But God, did I want to? Before Sophia left, I had imagined fatherhood differently. I thought I'd be sharing these moments with her, taking turns waking up for late-night feedings, marveling together at the tiny fingers and soft coos of our children, fighting over who got to hold them next. Instead, I was alone. The house, once filled with whispered dreams about our future, now felt hollow, an empty shell where my wife's absence was louder than any words she could have spoken. I can't tell you how many nights I sat in the dim glow of the nursery, my daughter in one arm, my son in the other, watching them sleep and wondering how the hell I was supposed to do this alone. How was I going to work? How was I going to provide? Would they even remember her? Would they ask about her one day, and what would I say? The thoughts were endless, relentless, suffocating. If the emotional toll wasn't enough, the financial reality hit me like a freight train. Sophia had come from money, a lot of money, and while I had always been financially stable, I wasn't wealthy by any means. We had built a comfortable life together, but when she left, she took more than just her presence. She took the security that came with being part of her world. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one night, bills scattered in front of me, calculator in hand, trying to figure out how I was going to stretch my savings. Formula, diapers, rent, utilities, it all added up fast. And the worst part? Childcare was a luxury I couldn't afford. Hiring a nanny? Out of the question. Daycare? Too expensive. I could barely afford the essentials, let alone the thousands it would take to put both kids into a decent care facility while I worked. That left me with exactly one option: figure it out on my own. The thing about being a single father is that the world isn't built for us. When a woman is raising kids alone, people sympathize. They rally around her, offer help, give support. When it's a man, people assume you failed. At job interviews, I'd mention that I had newborn twins at home, and instead of admiration, I got doubt. "How do you plan to juggle work and childcare?" they'd ask. I had no answer. I wanted to say, the same way any mother would. I'd figure it out, but I saw it in their eyes, hesitation. A man raising babies alone? That didn't fit their image of a responsible, reliable employee. I started keeping it to myself, hiding the bags under my eyes, drinking more coffee than I knew was healthy, pushing through interviews with a desperation I hated to admit. And still, rejection after rejection. It was like the world had already decided. Fathers weren't meant to do this alone. One night, after another long day of searching for work, the weight of everything finally broke me. My son had been crying for an hour. My daughter refused to sleep, and I was running on fumes. I tried everything. Rocking, singing, even just holding them close. But nothing worked. And then, as I stood there, swaying in the middle of the nursery, feeling like the worst father in the world, my knees buckled. I sank to the floor, holding both of them against my chest, and for the first time since Sophia left, I cried. Not silent, dignified tears. Ugly, shaking sobs that I couldn't stop. "I'm sorry," I whispered over and over again, rocking them as if that would somehow fix everything. I wasn't enough. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't capable enough. I was failing them. And worst of all, I wasn't sure I had it in me to keep going. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point, exhaustion won. My body gave in, my mind shut down, and I must have dozed off. When I woke up, it was morning. The sunlight was filtering through the window, casting a warm glow on my babies' faces. They had both fallen asleep in my arms, their tiny hands gripping onto my shirt like I was their entire world. And that's when it hit me. I was their entire world. They didn't care that I wasn't rich. They didn't care that I hadn't slept in days, or that my bank account was running dry. All they cared about was that I was there, that I held them, that I loved them. And at that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. I wasn't going to let Sophia's abandonment define our future. I wasn't going to be the man who crumbled under the weight of hardship. I was going to be the father they deserved. I pressed a kiss to both of their foreheads and wiped my tears away. "No more breaking down," I whispered, voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "No more doubting myself." From that day forward, I refused to be a victim of my circumstances. I was going to fight like hell to give my kids the life they deserved. I didn't know how yet, but I would figure it out, because that's what fathers do. And I was damn sure going to be the best one I could be. The moment I decided I wouldn't let Sophia's abandonment define my life, something shifted inside me. It wasn't a sudden burst of motivation or a cinematic moment of clarity. It was a slow, painful realization that if I didn't take control of my own fate, my twins would suffer. And that was unacceptable. So, I wiped my tears, put one foot in front of the other, and forced myself to keep moving. At first, my focus was simple. Find a job. Any job. I spent hours every day sending out resumes, knocking on doors, attending interviews. I dressed the part, rehearsed my answers, and walked into every office with a forced confidence I didn't always feel. And still, rejection after rejection. It wasn't my qualifications. I had experience, skills, but the second they learned I was a single father with newborn twins, the interest in my application vanished. I'd hear things like, "We're looking for someone with more flexibility. This role might require long hours. Would that be an issue? How do you plan to balance work and childcare?" It didn't take long for me to realize what they were really saying. They didn't believe I could handle both. It was frustrating. No, it was infuriating. Mothers did this all the time, and they were celebrated for it. But a father? Suddenly, I was unreliable, a risk. I wanted to scream at them. "You think I have a choice? You think I want to struggle?" But yelling wouldn't change anything. I needed to adapt. One afternoon, after yet another rejection, I walked into the grocery store with exactly $12.37 in my pocket. Diapers, formula, baby wipes. I stood in the aisle, staring at the prices, heart pounding in my chest. I didn't have enough. That was the moment it really hit me. I was failing. I couldn't even provide the basics for my kids. For the first time since Sophia left, panic set in. What if I couldn't do this? What if I was actually as unfit as the world seemed to believe? I felt like a failure. And then, My daughter grabbed my finger. She was too little to understand what was happening, but that tiny grip sent a wave of clarity through me. I was all they had. If I fell apart now, there would be no one to catch them. I forced myself to take a breath. There had to be another way. That night, as I rocked my son to sleep, an idea started forming. I had been applying for jobs that fit my past experience, corporate roles, office jobs, things that required long hours and childcare I couldn't afford. What if I was looking at this all wrong? What if, instead of trying to fit into someone else's world, I built something of my own? The thought terrified me. I had no business experience, no funding, no connections. But what I did have, a reason. And sometimes, a reason is enough. I stayed up all night, brainstorming ideas. What was something I could do from home? Something that didn't require huge upfront costs? And then it hit me, baby products. I had spent the past few months immersed in everything related to babies, clothes, accessories, essentials. I knew what worked, what was overpriced, what parents actually needed. I could create custom baby products, things that were functional but personal. I grabbed an old notebook and started scribbling down ideas. Personalized onesies, custom baby blankets, unique milestone markers for parents to track their baby's growth. The more I wrote, the more the idea took shape. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Hell, it would probably be the hardest thing I'd ever done. But the alternative? Spending my days begging for jobs that didn't want me, while my children went without. That wasn't an option. The next morning, I started small. I found a cheap supplier for blank onesies and fabric paint. I taught myself how to design and print custom baby clothing. My first attempt? A disaster. The paint smudged, the fabric bunched up. It looked like something a 5-year-old had made. But I didn't stop. I watched tutorials. I experimented. I kept trying, failing, trying again. Eventually, I got better. With my last bit of savings, I built a small online store. Nothing fancy, just a basic website with a few designs. Then, I took a deep breath and posted my first ad. Days passed. Nothing. I checked my website obsessively, refreshing the page over and over. 0 sales. Doubt crept in. Had I just wasted what little money I had left? And then, a notification. My first sale. It was a small order, just one onesie, customized with a baby's name. But it was everything. It was proof that someone, somewhere, believed in what I was doing. That night, as I packaged that tiny onesie, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. 1 sale turned into 2. 2 turned into 5. Soon, word of mouth started spreading. Mothers loved the personal touch. Friends told friends. I started getting requests for different designs. I wasn't making millions, but I was making enough. Enough to keep a roof over our heads. Enough to put food on the table. Enough to look at my kids and say, we're going to be okay. One evening, as I was finishing up orders, my phone buzzed. An email from a baby boutique owner. She had seen my products online and wanted to talk about a partnership. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. This was it. The moment I realized, this wasn't just survival anymore. I wasn't just getting by. I was building something real. That night, as I tucked my twins into bed, I whispered the same promise I had made months ago. I'll never let you down. Only this time, I believed it. Because I wasn't that broken man anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to save us. I was saving us myself. And nothing, not Sophia, not her mother, not the doubts that once consumed me, was going to stop me now. Starting a business wasn't the hard part. Keeping it alive was. Every day felt like a battle, a constant push against doubt, exhaustion, and the nagging fear that this whole thing would collapse before it had a chance to grow. But I had no choice. I was all my twins had. And that meant failure wasn't an option. I worked through the nights, my twins asleep beside me in their crib, while I printed designs, answered customer messages, and figured out how to run a business on pure willpower alone. During the day, I was a father first, feeding, changing, soothing, playing. During the night, I was an entrepreneur, hunched over my tiny desk, hands stained with fabric paint, running on coffee and sheer determination. Some nights, I barely slept at all. I'd hear one of the twins stir, and exhaustion would claw at me. telling me to let them cry for just 1 minute longer. But I couldn't. I wasn't just their dad. I was everything to them, and that meant pushing through, even when my body screamed for rest. There were so many mistakes. I priced my products too low at first, barely making enough to break even. I trusted the wrong suppliers, ended up with defective materials, and had to refund customers out of my own pocket. One month, I miscalculated shipping costs so badly that I lost money on every order. I wanted to quit so many times. But every time I thought about giving up, I'd hear my twins laugh, see their tiny hands reaching for me, and I'd remember. This was for them. So I kept going. I researched, I learned, I adjusted. I raised my prices, negotiated better deals, and started handling every single part of the business myself to save costs. Little by little, it worked. Orders increased. Mothers loved my designs, and before I knew it, my online store was gaining traction. One day, I woke up to 50 orders overnight. 50. I stared at my phone in disbelief, heart pounding. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a side hustle anymore. This was a real business. But with success came new problems. I was still just one person, juggling a growing company while raising twins alone. I needed help. I had no choice but to adapt. I hired a part-time assistant, someone to help process orders and manage customer service. I turned my tiny living room into a makeshift workspace, shelves lined with baby clothes, shipping boxes stacked in every corner. I had to set boundaries, dedicating mornings to my twins, afternoons to work, and nights to catching up on both. It wasn't easy. There were days I missed out on milestones, their first crawl, their first attempt at a word, because I was buried in work. The guilt ate me alive. But then, one night, as I sat on the floor with them, exhausted from a 12-hour workday, my daughter reached out and touched my face. "Dada," she whispered, my first name from her lips. Tears blurred my vision. This was why I was doing it. For them. For our future. For the life I had promised them when Sophia walked out the door. The more successful I became, the more people started to notice, including Sophia's mother. One afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. I knew the number immediately. Her. My stomach twisted, but I answered. "Michael," she greeted me smoothly, her voice as cold and detached as I remembered. "What do you want?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She sighed, as if my existence exhausted her. "I heard about your little business. I must admit, I'm surprised. I never thought you had the capability to succeed." I clenched my jaw. I didn't need her approval. She got to the point. "Sophia has been reconsidering some things." She abandoned her children," I interrupted. "There's nothing left to reconsider." She was pressured, her mother said, voice clipped. She made a mistake. But mistakes can be corrected. I laughed bitterly. "Not this one." Silence. Then she lowered her voice, as if she were offering me something I should be grateful for. "Michael, if you want, I can help you. I have connections. Investors. I can turn your business into something much bigger." I knew what she was really saying. She wanted control. The same way she had controlled Sophia's life. She wanted to do the same to me. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You're being foolish," she snapped. "No," I repeated. "I'm being free." And with that, I ended the call. I had fought too hard to build something on my own. I wasn't about to let the person who tore my family apart step back in and dictate my future. That night, I watched my twins sleep, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I had started with nothing, just heartbreak and 2 babies who depended on me. Now, I had a business, a home, a future. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And the best part? I had done it without Sophia, without her mother, without anyone but myself. I had proven them all wrong. I pressed a kiss to my son's forehead, then my daughter's. "We made it," I whispered. For the first time since Sophia left, I truly believed it. For all the years I had known Sophia, I believed she had everything. Money, power, an easy life paved by privilege. But what I had failed to see, what she had failed to see, was that none of it truly belonged to her. It was her mother's world, and Sophia was merely a pawn in a game she had never learned to play for herself. After she left, I stopped thinking about what her life was like. I had more important things to worry about: my twins, my business, my own survival. But fate has a funny way of circling back. Because while I was clawing my way up from the bottom, Sophia was slowly realizing that she had traded love for an empty throne. From the outside, Sophia's life looked untouched by hardship. She lived in a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive part of town, surrounded by marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and servants who catered to her every whim. She had a closet filled with designer clothes, a car that cost more than my apartment, and a mother who reminded her at every opportunity that she had made the right decision. "You would have been miserable with Michael," her mother would say, sipping imported tea from a delicate china cup. "You deserve a life of comfort." Sophia wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that leaving had been the right choice, that she had escaped a small life in favor of something greater. But then the nights would come, and the house would be too quiet, the luxury too cold, the bed too empty. She had walked away from the only people who had truly loved her, and the weight of that decision was beginning to crush her. At first, she told herself she was just adjusting. Her mother had reassured her that it was natural to feel unsettled after such a big change, that soon she would see the benefits of her decision. And so, Sophia tried to fit into this new world. She went to charity galas, shopping sprees, high society brunches filled with women who spoke about vacations in the Maldives and the latest fashion trends. But nothing felt real. She found herself glancing at her phone more often than she wanted to admit, her fingers hovering over my name, over old pictures of us, over the last photos she had taken of our babies before she left. She never dialed. She didn't know what she would say. Instead, she buried herself in distractions. She let her mother arrange dates with wealthy businessmen, went to social events, tried to pretend she was the same Sophia she had always been. But when she lay in bed at night, the truth gnawed at her. She had lost something she would never get back. One evening, at a lavish dinner party, someone mentioned a local entrepreneur who had built an entire business from scratch. "Amazing story," a man across the table said. "Single father. Started with nothing. Now his company is booming." Sophia wasn't listening at first. She was swirling the wine in her glass, barely paying attention to the conversation. Then she heard the name. Michael. Her stomach twisted. She froze, her breath catching in her throat as she tried to process what she had just heard. The words that followed hit her like a sledgehammer. Incredible guy. Built the whole thing while raising twins alone? Honestly, I don't know how he did it. He's an inspiration. His brand, Little Warriors, it's everywhere now. Sophia's hands trembled. Twins. They were talking about our children. Her children. For the first time in a long time, she felt fear. Because it had never truly occurred to her that I might not have needed her after all. That maybe, just maybe, I had moved on without her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her silk sheets, her mind racing with thoughts she didn't want to have. What did my life look like now? Were the twins happy? Did they even remember her? Would I ever forgive her? Unable to stop herself, she grabbed her phone, opened her laptop, and did something she had been too afraid to do before. She looked me up, and what she found left her breathless. My name wasn't just a mention in a dinner party conversation. It was everywhere. Interviews, articles, photos of me, standing beside racks of baby clothes, talking about my journey as a single father turned business owner. And then, the video, a recent news segment featuring me and the twins. She clicked on it without thinking, and within seconds, her world shattered. The video opened with footage of me in my workshop, smiling as I packed orders, adjusting tiny baby clothes on a rack. I looked different. Not broken. Not struggling. Stronger. Happier. Then the screen cut to the twins. Laughing. Running. Playing in a park. And as she watched their tiny faces, so full of life, so full of joy, Sophia broke down. Because they didn't look like children who had been abandoned. They didn't look like children who had suffered in her absence. They looked happy, loved, whole. Without her, she clutched the phone, her heart racing. The interviewer's voice filled the room. Michael, what's your biggest motivation? The camera zoomed in on me, and my answer was immediate. My kids. They saved me. Sophia gasped, pressing a hand over her mouth. At the end of the day, I don't regret a thing, I continued. Because everything I've built, everything I've achieved, it's all for them. And I wouldn't change a single moment. The video ended. The room was silent. And Sophia? She was shaking. Because in that moment, she realized the horrible, undeniable truth. She had made the worst mistake of her life. And now? She was too late to fix it. Sophia's hands trembled as she stared at the black screen of her laptop, her breath coming in uneven gasps. The video had ended, but the images refused to leave her mind. Michael, our children, they looked so happy. Without me. The reality of it clawed at my chest, suffocating me more than my mother's perfectly curated life ever could. I had left them, convinced that I was choosing the better path, the life I was meant to have. I had told myself it was for the best, that they would struggle without me, that Michael wouldn't be able to handle it alone. But I was wrong. He had built something beautiful, something successful. And worse, he didn't need me. A sharp knock on my bedroom door pulled me from my spiral of thoughts. Sophia? My mother's clipped voice sliced through the heavy silence. Dinner's ready. Don't make our guests wait. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. I'm not hungry. There was a pause. Then, in the icy tone that had dictated my entire life, she said, "Don't be dramatic." Dramatic? That was what she called this? I closed my eyes, gripping the edges of my desk. I had given up my family for this, for her approval, for a life that suddenly felt like a gilded cage, cold and suffocating. Another knock. This time sharper. I said, "I'm not hungry, Mother," I snapped, surprising even myself. Silence. Then her footsteps retreated. I let out a shaky breath, running a hand through my hair. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I needed to see them. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way Michael had looked in that interview. Strong, confident, alive. I saw the twins laughing, playing, living a life that had no space for me in it. By morning, I had made up my mind. I needed to see them. Even if Michael slammed the door in my face. Even if my children no longer recognized me. I needed to face what I had done. But first, I had to get out of this house. I stepped into the dining room, where my mother was already seated, sipping tea as she scrolled through her phone. She barely looked up when I entered. "You ignored dinner last night," she remarked, setting her cup down. "That's rude." I clenched my jaw. "I wasn't hungry." She raised an eyebrow, finally looking at me properly. "Something's wrong." I exhaled, gripping the back of the chair across from her. "I need to see Michael." Her expression didn't change. "That's a terrible idea. I need to see my children." "They're not your children anymore, Sophia," she said flatly. "You made your choice. And look where it got you." Something snapped inside me. Where did it get me, Mother? I shot back. Alone? Miserable? Trapped in this house like a perfectly decorated doll? Her eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I've spent my entire life watching my tone, watching my words, letting you dictate every decision I've ever made. And I listened to you when you told me to leave them." She set her phone down, studying me as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "And now you regret it?" The question hung in the air. I felt like she already knew the answer. "Michael has built a life without you, Sophia," she continued, her voice calm, controlled. "You showing up now, what do you think that will accomplish?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I don't know." Her lips curved into something cruelly amused. "Then let it go. Let it go." I looked around the dining room, at the expensive chandelier, the perfect floral arrangement in the center of the table, the vast space that felt emptier than ever. I thought about my children, the home I had abandoned, the man I had once loved. And suddenly, I saw my mother for who she really was. Not a protector, not a mentor, a woman who had spent her entire life controlling everyone around her. I had been one of her greatest successes, but not anymore. I stood up. She didn't move. "Where are you going?" I grabbed my coat, walking toward the door. "To fix what I can." Her voice was sharp as a blade. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to walk back in." I froze, hand on the doorknob. That was it. The final test. I turned back, looking her dead in the eye. I wasn't planning on it. And then I walked out. The drive to Michael's place felt like the longest of my life. Every mile was a step toward the consequences of my own actions. Would he even let me in? Would my children even know who I was? I clenched the steering wheel, forcing myself not to turn around. This was my doing. I had to face it. By the time I reached his neighborhood, my hands were shaking. I parked outside his home, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. The house was simple, nothing like the mansion I had left behind, but it looked warm. The lights inside were on. And then, the front door opened. Michael stepped outside, holding a bag of trash, his hair slightly messy, his expression tired but peaceful. And for the first time, I saw what I had never allowed myself to see before. He was happy, even without me, especially without me. I swallowed hard, stepping out of the car before I lost my nerve. He turned, his eyes landing on me. The bag of trash hit the ground. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, his voice, low and guarded. "What are you doing here?" I exhaled. I saw the interview. His jaw tightened, and I felt my throat close. I had so much to say, but no words felt right. So I said the only thing that mattered. "I'm sorry." Michael's face remained unreadable. "For what?" I blinked, my vision blurring with sudden tears. "For everything. For leaving. For listening to my mother. For thinking I could ever be happy without them." Michael exhaled, shaking his head. "You can't just come back now, Sophia." I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. "I know." Silence stretched between us. Then, he stepped forward slightly, looking me in the eye. "They don't remember you," he said softly. The pain of it ripped through me like a knife. I covered my mouth, nodding again. "I deserve that." Michael studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "I don't hate you, Sophia, but we don't need you anymore." Tears fell freely now. I nodded one last time, stepping back. I needed to see it for myself." Michael said nothing, and as I turned back toward my car, my heart breaking all over again, I knew I had lost them forever. I drove away from Michael's house feeling like my entire body had been hollowed out. The night air was cool, but I could barely breathe. My hands shook on the steering wheel, my vision blurred with unshed tears. It was over. I had come, hoping, what, exactly? That he would forgive me? That I could somehow piece together the life I had so carelessly thrown away? But the truth had been staring me in the face the moment Michael looked at me with nothing in his eyes. Not love, not anger, just indifference. And that hurt more than anything, because it meant I was no longer a part of his world, no longer a part of their world. I don't know how long I drove before pulling into an empty parking lot. The silence was deafening. I leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel, and let the first sob tear through me. This was my doing. I had believed my mother's words. I had let her convince me that leaving Michael was the right choice, that I was choosing a better life. But what had I actually chosen? An empty house? A mother who only saw me as a reflection of her own ambitions? A life so perfectly polished it had lost all meaning? I had walked away from a man who had loved me more than anything. I had abandoned 2 innocent children who had needed me. And now, I had to live with the fact that they had learned to exist without me, thrive without me. Michael had told me as much, his words delivered without cruelty, but with a finality that shattered me. "We don't need you anymore." I watched her leave, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, my heart a tangled mess of emotions I didn't have the energy to sort through. There was a time when seeing Sophia would have destroyed me, a time when I would have begged her to stay, fought for her, convinced her that we could rebuild everything she had thrown away. But that time had passed. I wasn't the broken man she had left behind. I wasn't waiting for her anymore. And my children? They didn't even know who she was. That was the part that hit her the hardest. I had seen it in her eyes, the way her breath hitched when I said it. "They don't remember you." It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was just the truth. And the truth had finally caught up to her. She had left, believing I would crumble without her. Instead, I had risen. And now? There was no room left for her here. I don't know how long I sat in that parking lot before my phone rang. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the name on the screen. Mother. I hesitated, then picked up. Where are you? She asked immediately, her tone clipped. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Out. A pause. Then, did you go see him? Of course, she knew. She always knew. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Yes. She sighed like I was a child who had just embarrassed her in public. Sophia, what did I tell you? That man is nothing. You have no reason to. They don't remember me. I cut in, my voice hoarse. Silence. For the first time in my life, my mother had nothing to say. I left my family for you, I whispered. And for what? Sophia, she started, but I didn't let her finish. I'm not coming back, Mother. Her sharp intake of breath was almost satisfying. Almost. I ended the call before she could speak again. I had wasted too many years living by her rules. And for what? To end up alone? After Sophia left, I went back inside, closing the door behind me. The twins were still asleep, their tiny faces relaxed, peaceful. I crouched beside them, brushing my fingers over my daughter's soft curls. This was what mattered. Not the past. Not Sophia. This. The life I had built for them. The security, the love, the happiness. I had spent too long mourning what I had lost. Now, I only cared about what I had gained. The sun was rising when I finally got back to my apartment. Everything felt different now. I had no illusions left. Michael would never take me back. My children would never know me as their mother. And maybe that was what I deserved. I took one last look at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the girl who had left her family behind for money and status. She was someone else now. Someone who had lost everything. But maybe, just maybe, that was the price I had to pay to finally be free. With one final breath, I walked away. And this time, I didn't look back. 9 and 10. Moving forward without her. I woke up the morning after Sophia's visit feeling lighter than I had in years. I had expected to feel something. Maybe anger. Maybe pain. Maybe a lingering ache from seeing her face again. But there was nothing. No sadness. No resentment. Just relief. Because last night had proved something I hadn't fully realized until now. I was free. Sophia was nothing more than a shadow of my past, and she had no hold over my life anymore. I had built something without her, something stronger, something unshakable, and I wasn't about to let anything, or anyone, disrupt it. I went about my morning as usual, made breakfast, played with the twins, answered emails from customers. It felt like just another day which, in a way, was the biggest sign of all. Sophia's return should have shaken my world. But it hadn't. I had already rebuilt my life. And now, I was moving forward. That afternoon, I had a meeting with a group of investors who were interested in helping expand Little Warriors into retail stores. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even imagined something like this. Back then, I was just a struggling single father, trying to make ends meet. But today, I walked into that meeting as a man who had earned his place in the world. The deal was a success. When I left the office, I checked my phone, scrolling through emails from customers, parents thanking me for what my business had done for them. And as I read those messages, a realization settled deep in my chest. This was the life I was meant to have. Not one trapped under someone else's expectations. Not one spent chasing after people who never valued me. This, my children, my business, my future. That's all I needed. I didn't see or hear from Sophia after that night. I don't know where she went. Maybe she tried to fix things with her mother. Maybe she left town. Maybe she stayed, watching from a distance as we continued on without her. But it didn't matter anymore. She had made her choice, and we had made ours. The past was the past, and I had no reason to look back. That night, as I tucked the twins into bed, I found myself pausing by their cribs, just watching them sleep. Two little miracles who had saved me in ways they would never fully understand. They didn't need to know how hard it had been. They didn't need to know about the nights I had spent crying, about the rejections, about the fear that had nearly swallowed me whole. All they needed to know was that I had never given up on them, and I never would. As I turned off the lights and stepped out of their room, I felt something settle inside me. Something strong. something unshakable. This was my life. And it was just getting started.